Imagine handing someone a gift every single day for 6 years. Not a small gift. A gift that gets them promoted, praised, celebrated, and paid more than they have ever been paid. A gift that builds their reputation in the professional world they share with you into something you helped make and that you are not receiving credit for. Now imagine that the person receiving your gift every single day for 6 years is not grateful. They are not even aware they are receiving it. Or if they are aware, they have found a way to interpret your contribution as support for their vision rather than the vision itself. 6 years. Every deliverable, every analysis, every strategy, every framework. And the whole time you are doing this, a thought sits at the back of your mind that you keep pushing down because the alternative is too painful to sit with. The thought that says the only reason this is working for them is because it was supposed to work for you. And then one Tuesday morning something happens that breaks the arrangement permanently. Not something you did. Not a confrontation or a conflict or a resignation. An email. One company-wide email that puts your name one level above theirs in the organizational chart. And what you see happen to a person when 6 years of borrowed success is suddenly threatened by the advancement of the person it was borrowed from. That is what this story is about. Welcome to Venom Thread. This story has 3 twists. I need you to stay until the third one because the third one changes every single thing you thought you understood about the first 2. Her name was Jordan Miles, and she was 27 years old when she joined Stratford Group, a mid-sized management consulting firm with a reputation for analytical rigor and client relationships so carefully managed they felt almost familial. Jordan had come from a background in behavioral economics, the specific intersection of data and human psychology that makes the numbers mean something. In terms of what people actually do rather than what models predict they will do. This is not a skill set that is easy to find. It is not a skill set that can be replicated by someone who has not spent years inside both disciplines simultaneously. Jordan had spent those years. She had a PhD she had completed in 4 years instead of 6, and a consulting portfolio from her previous role that demonstrated the specific quality her new employer had hired for. She could take a complicated human problem, build an analytical model around it, and produce a recommendation that felt less like a data output and more like insight. Her new manager in the firm's People and Organizational Strategy division had said to her in the hiring conversation that he had been looking for someone with her precise combination of skills for 2 years. He had said it with the specific enthusiasm of someone who understood the scarcity of what they had found. His name was Derek Hale. He had been at Stratford Group for 4 years. He had a reputation as a strategic thinker and a strong presenter. He was the person who made the case to leadership for every piece of work the division produced. He was very good at making the case. He was significantly less good at producing the work the case was being made for. That was about to become Jordan's problem. The pattern emerged so gradually that Jordan did not have a name for it for almost 18 months. In the first few months, she attributed it to the ordinary dynamics of a new employee in a senior partner-led division. Of course, Derek was the one in the client meetings. He had the relationships. Of course, Derek was the one presenting to leadership. He had the context from years of organizational history she did not have. Of course, the work she produced was folded into the division's output without her name prominently attached. That was how consulting firms worked, with work product belonging to the firm and individual attribution being a secondary concern. These were all reasonable explanations. Derek provided several of them, unprompted, in the first 6 months. He explained the structure of the division and how credit was distributed and how junior analysts built their reputations through internal work before external visibility. He was thorough in his explanations. He was warm and mentoring in his tone. He was giving her the framework for why the arrangement was normal, and she was accepting it because the framework was reasonable and because she was new and because questioning the framework in month 3 of a new role is not what analytical people who understand the importance of data quantity do. She was waiting for more data. She would have it by month 18. Month 18 is when Derek presented a piece of work to the firm's managing partners that Jordan had produced entirely and autonomously. Not partially, entirely. She had designed the research framework, collected and analyzed the data, built the model, stress-tested the assumptions, written the narrative, and produced the final deliverable in a format she had designed specifically for the client's leadership team to absorb efficiently. Derek had reviewed it. He had made 3 comments, all of which Jordan had incorporated. He had attended the presentation. He had delivered it. He had received, following the presentation, a managing partner email describing his analytical insight as some of the strongest the firm had seen on a behavioral economics project. Jordan had received a copy of that email. Her name had appeared once, in a sentence that described her as providing strong analytical support to Derek's strategic framework. She read that sentence 4 times. She printed the email. She put it in a folder. She labeled the folder with the date. She did not say anything to Derek. She did not say anything to anyone. She opened her laptop and she went back to work. She had understood something that morning that she had been refusing to fully understand for a year and a half. The arrangement was not going to correct itself. Nobody was going to notice and fix it. If the record was going to reflect what was actually happening in this division, she was going to have to build the record herself. And so she started. The archive she built over the next 4 years was not a document. It was a methodology. Jordan's background in behavioral economics included a detailed understanding of how institutional decisions are made and what forms of evidence carry weight in what institutional contexts. She did not build a folder full of grievances. She built a system of corroborated documentation organized around 3 categories of evidence. Authorship evidence, which was the metadata trail from every file she had created, creation timestamps, edit histories, version numbers, user account data, contribution evidence, which was the contemporaneous communication record showing her analytical approach preceding Derek's presentations, emails, Slack threads, shared document comments with timestamps, and context evidence, which was the external record of her expertise as recognized by people outside the immediate dynamic, conference presentations she had given, publications she had contributed to, client communications that referenced her work directly. She built this system quietly, and she maintained it without varying her professional behavior toward Derek by a single observable degree. She was pleasant. She was collaborative. She was extraordinary at her work. And she was building a case that, when the time came, would be the most comprehensively documented account of credit misattribution in the firm's history. She did not know when the time would come. She knew it would come. She kept building. The promotion came at the beginning of year 6, and it came through a channel Derek had not anticipated and could not have blocked even if he had understood it was happening. The firm's managing partner, who had been Jordan's secondary point of contact on 2 projects over the previous 18 months had, without informing Derek or anyone in the division, submitted Jordan's name for a newly created principal-level position in the firm's behavioral economics practice. A position that had been created specifically because of the firm's growing recognition that behavioral economics was becoming a strategic differentiator and that they needed dedicated senior leadership in the practice area. Jordan had been invited to a conversation with the managing partner 6 weeks before the announcement. She had attended that conversation without telling Derek. She had answered every question the managing partner asked with the specific fluency of someone who had spent 6 years building the expertise the role required. The offer had been extended the following week. She had accepted. The announcement went company-wide on a Thursday morning at 8:30. Derek read it in his office. Jordan was in a client call. She did not know yet that what happened in Derek's office between 8:30 and 9:15 that morning was the beginning of the part of the story she had spent 6 years building toward. She would find out later. She would find out in a way that produced the first twist. The first twist arrived through Derek's assistant. Her name was Marguerite, and she had worked with Derek for 3 years, and she came to Jordan's office at 11:15 on the morning of the announcement with the specific expression of a person who has decided to do something difficult and has passed the point of being able to change their mind. She closed the door. She sat down. She said, "I need to tell you something about what happened this morning, and I need you to know that what I am about to say is not something I am doing easily." Then she described what she had witnessed in Derek's office between 8:30 and 9:15. Derek had made 4 phone calls, not to congratulate Jordan, to 4 senior colleagues in different practice areas across the firm. In each call, he had described the promotion as a mistake born of incomplete information available to the managing partner who had made the recommendation. In each call, he had described Jordan's work over the previous 6 years as technically strong, but strategically dependent, good at execution, not capable of origination. In each call, he had planted a version of the previous 6 years in which Derek had been the strategic originator and Jordan had been the capable implementer who had now been elevated beyond her actual contribution. He was not responding to the promotion with resentment. He was responding to it by attempting to preemptively rewrite the record before Jordan was in a position of sufficient authority to write it herself. He had made 4 calls in 45 minutes. He had been efficient. He had been precise. And he had been overheard by the person who had been working 3 feet from his office for 3 years and who had decided, on the morning that Jordan's name appeared in a company-wide promotion announcement, that she was done being 3 feet away from things she was not reporting. Jordan thanked Marguerite. She asked her one question. Would you be willing to put what you witnessed in writing? Marguerite said yes. Jordan nodded. She went back to her laptop. She opened the archive. She added a new folder labeled with that morning's date. She created a document, and she wrote down everything Marguerite had just told her while it was fresh, and she sent it to Marguerite to confirm accuracy. Then she opened the archive's master index, and she looked at 6 years of corroborated documentation, and she understood that what Derek had done in 45 minutes that morning had not weakened her position. It had completed it. He had given her the 4th category of evidence she had not yet had, behavioral evidence of consciousness of wrongdoing. A person who responds to a colleague's promotion by making 4 calls to rewrite the history of a 6-year professional relationship is a person who understands that the history, if examined accurately, does not support the position they have been occupying. You do not rewrite history you are comfortable with. You only rewrite history that threatens you. Jordan called her employment attorney at noon. She had retained one 4 months earlier, in anticipation of a promotion process she had known was underway. The attorney had been waiting for her call. Jordan said, I think we are ready. The attorney said, send me the archive. The second twist came from a direction that nobody in this story had seen coming. Not Jordan. Not Derek. Not the managing partner who had made the promotion recommendation and who was now at the center of a formal internal review process that Jordan's HR complaint had triggered. The second twist came from a client. A client named Fiona Osei, who was the head of people strategy at a major financial services firm and who had been the primary client contact on 4 projects over the previous 3 years, projects on which Jordan had been the analytical lead and Derek had been the client-facing relationship manager. Fiona had seen the company-wide announcement. She had sent Jordan a congratulatory email the morning of the announcement that Jordan had read and responded to warmly. What Jordan had not known was that Fiona had also sent an email to Stratford Group's managing partner. Not about Jordan's promotion. About something Fiona had been sitting on for 8 months and had been uncertain whether to raise and had now decided to raise because the promotion announcement had given her a clear and appropriate reason to. Fiona's email to the managing partner described a conversation she had had with Derek at a client dinner 8 months earlier, a dinner at which Jordan had not been present, in which Derek had described Jordan's analytical capabilities to Fiona in terms that were designed to position Fiona as Jordan's client relationship rather than the firm's, and in which he had suggested that Jordan's value to Fiona's projects was contingent on Derek's strategic guidance. Fiona had understood this, in the moment, as Derek managing a client relationship. She had understood it differently 8 months later when she read the promotion announcement and understood the full context of what Derek had been doing in that conversation. He had not been managing a client relationship. He had been attempting to make Jordan's continued client access dependent on Derek's continued presence in the engagement. He had been trying to make her portable talent invisible without him. And Fiona had kept the email she had sent herself immediately following that dinner describing the conversation while it was fresh. She attached it to her email to the managing partner. The HR investigation that followed lasted 11 weeks. Jordan did not attend any of the investigation meetings with Derek's presence. She submitted her documentation in 3 organized packages corresponding to the 3 primary categories of her archive, plus the behavioral evidence from the morning of the promotion. The investigation committee, which included an external employment law specialist retained for the purpose, reviewed the metadata trail, the communication record, the contemporaneous documentation, the Marguerite statement, and the Fiona Osei email. They interviewed 14 people. The investigation's formal findings took 6 pages. The conclusions occupied 3 of them. The committee found credible and corroborated evidence of sustained credit misattribution across a 6-year period, retaliatory conduct following the promotion announcement, and attempted interference with client relationships. Derek was terminated, not placed on a performance improvement plan, not offered a negotiated exit, terminated with cause, which had specific implications for the equity position and the departure package and the professional reference that any future employer would receive in response to a background check inquiry. He did not contest the termination through legal channels. His attorney, Jordan was told later, had reviewed the documentation and had advised him that contesting would require the documentation to be examined in a formal legal proceeding, which would produce a public record of the investigation's findings. He accepted the termination. He left the building with what a terminated for cause employee receives, which is significantly less than what he had been expecting to leave with at any point in the previous 6 years. The third twist is the one that arrived 4 months after Derek's termination, and that Jordan describes as the moment she understood that the story she had been living was larger than she had known. She received a message through a professional network from a woman named Celestine who had worked at Derek's previous firm, the firm he had been at before Stratford Group, and who had seen a brief mention of the Stratford Group HR proceedings in an industry newsletter. Celestine's message was 3 sentences. It said, "I worked with Derek Hale for 3 years at my previous firm. I believe something similar happened to me. I did not know how to document it at the time." Jordan read those 3 sentences, and she felt something she had not expected to feel at that point in the process, which was that she was not the origin of the story she had been living. She was a chapter in it. Derek had a career that predated Stratford Group and that predated his time at Stratford Group by a decade, and that, as the network of people who found Jordan over the following 8 months slowly revealed, had been built on the same methodology across multiple firms and multiple talented analytical professionals who had not known how to build the archive she had built. Some of them had tried to raise concerns and had been dismissed. Some of them had left their companies without understanding fully what had happened. Some of them were still in roles that Derek had shaped to his benefit before he left. 11 people found Jordan in 8 months. Not all of them had evidence. Some of them had only their experience and no documentation. But Jordan's archive, which she shared, carefully and legally, with anyone who found her and who needed to understand what documented evidence of this pattern looked like, became a template, a resource, a demonstration that the pattern was documentable if you knew what to document and how to document it. She had not set out to build a resource. She had set out to protect herself. She had built something larger than either. I want to tell you what Jordan said when I asked her about the third twist, about finding out that Derek's history predated her and that she was not the beginning of the story. She was quiet for a moment. She said, "I think the hardest part of finding that out was sitting with the fact that if I had been at his previous firm, I might have been one of the people who didn't know how to document it. Because the only reason I knew how to document it was the specific combination of my background in behavioral economics and my understanding of how institutional decisions are made and what evidence carries weight in what contexts. And most people don't have that combination. Most people who experience what I experienced don't have a PhD that gives them the analytical framework to understand what they need to build before they need it. And that's not a criticism of them. That's a statement about the system. About how the system makes it easy to take credit from people who are too busy doing the work to simultaneously build the documentation that proves the work is theirs." She paused. She said, "The archive was not a genius move. It was a necessity move. It was the only tool available to me that I trusted completely. Because at the end of everything, after the investigation and the termination and the Celestine message and the 11 people who found me, the thing that held was the documentation. Not the testimonies, though they mattered. Not the client email, though it was important. The documentation. The timestamps and the metadata and the version histories and the authorship trails built over 4 years of quiet, methodical, invisible work." She smiled. She said, "He spent 6 years taking credit for invisible work. He never considered that the invisible work had been documenting him the entire time. I gave him 6 years of material. He just didn't know the material cut both ways." Thank you for being here on Venom Thread tonight. If someone is standing in your light right now, keep the record. Keep every file, every email, every timestamp. Not as a weapon, as a receipt. Because the truth doesn't need an argument when it has a paper trail. Subscribe and hit the notification bell. New darkness next week. And we are nowhere near finished.